So the Invincible War is finally here, and it is fantastic. In fact, I think this is probably the best episode in the entire series. This was a monumental episode, so there's a ton to talk about, so today I'm going to do things a little differently. Rather than going through the episode and discussing everything I liked, I'm going to break it down into categories explaining why I thought this was the best version of the Invincible War. Don't worry, these categories will be pretty in-depth and all-encompassing. There will be time codes in the description if you want to jump around at all. If you enjoyed this video, you should leave a like and subscribe, as I've got a bunch more Invincible videos coming in the next few weeks. Alright, let's get into it. Overall, I think this was pretty much a perfect episode of television. If that's not bold enough of a statement to make, I'll add a few others. I also believe this is the best episode of Invincible in the entire series, and I believe this version of the Invincible War is better than the version in the comics. I know some may think that sounds a little dramatic or that's recency bias talking, but I really do believe that and have a lot to back it up. This episode had a very high bar to live up to, and I honestly wasn't sure how they were going to pull it off, but this episode exceeded expectations. The categories I think this episode more than delivered on are the comic accuracy, the writing, the voice acting, the music, the animation, the emotion, and the cool factor. Obviously, there's far more categories you could actually use to break down or review an episode on, but these are the ones I'm going with for this episode because I have something to say about each of these categories. Alright, let's get into these categories. Comic accuracy, 10 out of 10. I knew this had to be the first thing I discussed because I know a lot of comic fans will consider it blasphemous to consider this episode better than the comic counterpart. But realistically, the comic accuracy in this episode is one of the largest reasons for its success. The episode was one of the most page-to-screen accurate episodes we have gotten in the show. There was almost no major changes to the source material. Some of the only changes they made were characters they didn't have the rights to not appearing, which isn't really a negative since they ended up getting the rights to way more characters than I thought they would, and the ones missing didn't really impact the story at all. Yes, I'm talking to you, Spawn fans. Sorry he wasn't in the episode, but that doesn't really affect the comic accuracy, at all. The only other changes besides that was just them expanding on scenes and showing us more of the fights, which was awesome. They took great source material, stayed as true to it as possible, but expanded upon it and improved it where they could, which is about the best thing you can ask for when it comes to a comic book adaptation. Comic book adaptations are almost never direct adaptations. Think about the MCU or DC or The Boys even. They all take elements of stories and characters from the comics and create new stories with them. Invincible is probably the closest thing we have to a direct adaptation of a Western comic, and this is probably the most comic accurate episode of Invincible. Next category, writing. 10 out of 10. If you're a fan of the channel, you should know I'm very big on writing in general, but especially the writing in this series. This episode is so brilliantly written, I could talk about it for days. In fact, I almost made a whole video breaking down how this episode follows the 3-act structure pretty much perfectly, but instead, I'll just do it right here. So if you're not familiar, the 3-act structure is a narrative model that divides the story into 3 sections or acts, with important moments for the story in each act. It's prevalent in pretty much all stories we consume, especially in screenwriting. We start the episode with important exposition for both our antagonist and protagonist, setting up where they're at and what their ordinary world is. Then we get a very clear inciting incident with the Invincible variants arriving and causing mayhem, which pulls Mark into the conflict. After fighting Mohawk Invincible, Mark decides he's going to figure out what's going on and put a stop to it, which pulls us into the second act and gives us our central narrative question, which is, will Mark be able to stop this threat? Our Act 2 gives us a clear delivery on the premise of the episode, seeing various Invincibles fighting various heroes around the world, and escalates the conflict for our Mark until we get to our midpoint, which I believe is when Eve is injured in the fight. This moment serves as a significant shift in the protagonist's path, and it raises the stakes. Then, I believe our low point for the story is Rex's death, which slows the pace down of the episode for the first time and allows us to really see the destruction caused and how much our heroes are losing. On top of that, we see Mark has pulled himself away from the fight, he's shaken up, abandoned his duty as a hero to be there for the person he cares about the most, even if it's eating him up and the world is hurting. Our third act break is when Angstrom reassembles the remaining Invincibles and displaces all of them, serving as an unexpected twist for our protagonists to rethink their approach, setting up for the final confrontation and climax, which is when Mark finally finds and confronts Angstrom. This is where we get an answer to our central narrative question, which asks, will Mark be able to stop this threat? And the answer is, kind of. Angstrom's gone, but for how long and what cost? The answer to this central narrative question plays a huge role into Mark's character arc for this season, but I'll come back to that in a sec. The remainder of the episode could fall into the category of descending action and resolution, which is a larger chunk of the episode than descending action usually takes up. That's because this episode is adapting two issues, 60 and 61. Issue 60 is the Invincible War, which is what a majority of this episode is and what follows the three-act structure so well. And issue 61 is almost like an epilogue issue, showing us all of the aftermath of issue 60. This makes it seem like the episode doesn't actually follow the three-act structure, but it does because the three-act structure isn't a set of rules or parameters a story has to follow, which means that it doesn't really matter if the descending action in an episode of TV is a bit longer than you'd expect, especially since it's setting up another big event and it's showing us how our characters are reacting to what has happened, which is important for their arcs. This episode moves Mark's character arc forward nearly perfectly. Mark's main arc this season has been about his evolving morality, shifting from a black and white view of good and evil to a more complex gray area. The catalyst for this arc was last season's finale, when he believed he had killed Angstrom Levy. In response, he rigidly clung to his morals, trying to convince himself he was doing the right thing. When he discovered Cecil was working with murderers, Mark snapped. How could he be on the right path if his own boss condoned such actions? This led him to reevaluate his priorities, focusing on Eve, Oliver, and his mom. Throughout the season, his morality was tested again and again. His brother killing criminals, being forced to kill the immortal, and realizing even his most heroic moments have dire consequences. This episode is the breaking point. The event that set all of this into motion, his supposed killing of Angstrom, turned out to be false. But rather than relief, Mark faces the harsh reality that Angstrom's survival led to Earth's most devastating attack and nearly cost Eve her life. For so long, Mark questioned his role, hero or killer, good or bad. But now he sees the truth. Morality isn't that simple. The cost of rigidly defining right and wrong is too high. That realization culminates when he has Angstrom in his hands again. He knows the cost of sparing him. He knows what killing him would mean. He makes his choice, but before he can act, Angstrom slips away. Now, Mark is in the opposite position of last season's finale. He's seen the cost of not killing Angstrom and he feels responsible. He understands now. Morality can't be that black and white. He can't separate being a hero from making impossible choices. He can't be the good guy and the guy that saves everyone. Now, he's presented with a new conflict that only has two outcomes, kill or be killed with the world around him. So what will he do? This is incredible writing for almost any TV show, but is second to none when it comes to comic book adaptations. Robert Kirkman, you're a legend, man. If we see your name on the writing credit for episode 8 as well, I would not be surprised if it somehow tops this episode. Okay, spent a lot of time on that, but like I said, I really enjoy writing. I didn't want to spend the whole video talking about each character's arc, as that will probably be its own video once Season 3 is concluded. But moving on. Voice acting, 10 out of 10. Steven Yeun genuinely deserves an Emmy for this episode. My girlfriend didn't even know that he voiced all of the variants at first. She thought it was a different voice actor for each one. Steven was able to showcase so much range with each variant, and the way he was able to give us so much intrigue into these characters and their emotions with just his delivery of 1 or 2 lines alone is remarkable. Additionally, just about every voice actor had a chance to shine, and they all delivered, especially Sterling K. Brown as Angstrom, with those perfect evil laughs. I really enjoyed our new additions like Jonathan Banks as Britt, Doug Bradley bringing the creep with the technicians, and finally, good old Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Conquest. His voice was a little different than what I and a lot of others were expecting, but the more times I rewatched that last scene, which was a lot, the more I enjoyed his voice. Also, I think it's just dumb to assume that this is the first and only time in this series where they fumbled on a casting. Every actor they've gotten has been perfect for their respective character. So let's let JDM show us what he's got with Conquest. I'm sure it's going to be gnarly. Music, 10 out of 10. This one will probably not be as long because there's not much to say, but I thought the music in this episode stood out significantly. The moment towards the end of the episode, after Powerplex has his outburst, really stood out to me music-wise. The melody of the theme slowed down and in a different key on the strings. Man, that shit was hitting. All of it was hitting the whole episode, really. Animation, 10 out of 10. This genuinely, without question, is the best looking episode of Invincible. The entire episode feels more fluid, more vibrant, and more detailed than any other episode. But one moment that really stood out to me was Angstrom and Mark's fight at the end of the episode, which was greatly expanded upon to give us some awesome action. But I mean, look at these shots. The color, the lighting, the fluidity, it's just awesome. I'm sure you guys have seen some of the fan animations or edits that are like if Invincible focused more on the lighting and composition, and this scene looked like those, but better. All around though, all of the fights were just awesome, and there wasn't any moment that any of the animation looked bad for a second to me. This episode didn't just look good for an Invincible episode. It looked good by any standard, and I'll stand behind that. There will always be people that will say, well, it could have been better. Sure, man, but it's the best it's ever been, which makes you seem like an unpleasable fan if you continue to complain. And I honestly don't know how much better it could be while maintaining the show's art style. Anyways, emotion, 10 out of 10. This kind of goes hand in hand with the writing and voice acting, but I just wanted to include it because delivering on an emotional front is probably the most important thing a story can do. The stakes had weight to them, the sad moments felt sad, the triumphant moments felt triumphant, and surprisingly, there's some really solid humor in this episode as well. Moments like the Cahor guy showing up again, the variant trying to trick Debbie and flying away, you're fucked, dude, and just Business Baby in general were some of the funniest moments this season. Additionally, Rex's death was just as devastating as I expected it to be, so yeah, all around, this episode more than delivered on the emotional front. The cool factor, 10 out of 10. This is probably one of the more subjective categories, but come on, man. This episode was cool as shit. Every single variant has a cool design or a cool moment or both. We get some of the coolest fights of the season, introductions to new characters that are all cool. Tech Jacket, Best Tiger, Britt. Come on, man. Angstrom is cool as hell. Rex is cool as hell. Donald has one of the coolest moments in the episode. Powerplex even gets to kill a variant. That's cool as hell. And Oliver may be the MVP of the whole episode. He takes out 2 of the variants. And of course, Conquest. Doesn't get much cooler than that. Some of the other things I liked about the episode that don't warrant full categories are things like the attention to detail. This episode is just packed to the brim with details, and every scene feels like it had a ton of time spent on it in every department. I also loved how global this event felt. It's something I hadn't really noticed was absent from other comic book adaptations, but now that I've seen it done so well here, it feels glaring in other properties. Seeing different countries and cities being attacked and different heroes from those places defending them made it just feel so large. It was awesome. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this episode. I could probably talk about it for days, but I gotta get this video out there before the finale, so I think we're gonna wrap it up here. I 100% believe this episode is the best episode of Invincible, and this version of the Invincible War is better than the version in the comics. The writing, comic accuracy, animation, music, emotion, and overwhelming coolness of this episode just makes it an undeniable 10 out of 10 in my opinion. If you disagree, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments, or even if you agreed for that matter. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, and as always, make sure to subscribe. I'll be doing a video of my first reaction to the finale tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Until then, I will see you guys next time. Peace.